لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In our series, When Muslims Work Together, I've been trying to figure out a logical approach to continuing the lessons that I have in store for you, that I have in mind for you. And I figured this would be probably the most common sense approach. The two ayat I'm going to revolve the lesson today is going to revolve around. One of them belongs to Surah Al-Ma'idah, the one I recited before you. And the other one, a very similar ayah that completes this subject, belongs to the surah before this one, Surah An-Nisa. Both of these ayat deal with the same subject matter, and that matter is justice. They're fundamentally calls from Allah for Muslims to commit themselves to justice and fairness. Of course, justice and fairness in all of our dealings is not just something we worry about when we're working together in Islamic organizations or collective efforts. It's something that's a priority in Muslim life, even in our personal life. I have to be fair to my wife. I have to be fair to my kids. I have to be fair to my neighbor. I have to be fair to my parents, etc., etc. And then on top of that was ziyada. In addition, I have to be good to them on top of the fairness. Fairness is basically the minimum a Muslim should be doing. It's the least you should be doing. And then on top of that, you're supposed to do good. So doing good to others is above and beyond the minimum expectation of fairness. And incidentally, fairness is not something that Islam came to define in every aspect of life. Because some of the aspects of fairness were already understood. Allah already put them in the fitrah of the human being. And even in Meccan Quran, when the ahkam, the rulings of Islam haven't been elaborated in detail yet, one of the recurring themes in Meccan Quran is fairness. Because pushing the orphan around, or not feeding the poor, or taking money from somebody and stealing and killing unjustly, you don't have to be a Muslim to know that that's wrong. You could be from any religion, any culture. You could be an atheist and still protest economic injustice, civil rights injustice, human injustices. These are universal values in some respects. Islam comes and completes them and perfects them. But some sense of that is already there inside human psyche. One of the things that made Islam very appealing to the first generation, and it was a very powerful attraction, was its call for justice. And our call for justice, when we talk about justice, there are two concepts, by the way, that we shouldn't confuse with each other, but they're related to one another. On the one hand, there's justice, and on the other hand, there's equality. Equality and justice are not the same. They're not the same, but they are related to one another. For example, when we talk about human rights, we talk about equal human rights. Isn't that true? We talk about equal human rights for everybody, and that's a matter of justice. But in Islam, we make a further distinction. We don't say that giving everybody exactly equal, that may not always be fair. If somebody worked harder and somebody worked less and you give them equal pay, that's not fair. So equality is not always justice, but in some instances it is. The same approach, incidentally, I know I'm going to start a controversy here, but the same approach the Quran takes and the Sunnah of the Prophet takes, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it comes to the rights of men and the rights of women. It is unequivocally clear in Islam that the rights of men and women are not equal. They're absolutely not equal. I mean, the Quran is explicit about that. They're different, absolutely. I'm not going to say higher or lower, but they are different. They're significantly different from one another. The expectations from men are different. The expectations from women are different. The obligations men have are different. The obligations women have are different. The rights men have are different. And the rights women have are different. So even though they're not equal, the Quran's argument is they are still fair. They're still just. In the modern sense, some of you college students, you go to college and you take a women's lib course. I met a few students who've taken women's lib in college, and they get really stumped because the professor asked them, how come Islam doesn't give equal rights to men and women? How is that fair? See, again, the concept is you're confusing equality with justice. There's two separate issues and you have to talk about them separately. If you want equal rights, and one of these students just came and asked me, and I was on my way to a road trip, and he said, can you just give me a 1-minute answer so I can tell my professor something? I was like, I don't know if you can have the conversation about equality and justice in 1 minute, but if you say that they are equal, then they should be equal in creation too. Men don't get pregnant. Men don't carry children. Men are physiologically different. Psychology studies are now not even talking about the physiological differences between men and women, but the neurological differences between men and women, the psychological differences between men and women, the sociological differences between men and women. This is not just something Islam is saying, modern science is saying it, sociology is saying it, modern society is saying it. Men are from Mars, women are, Venus or Mars. I keep confusing those two, right? Right, but they are fundamentally different. So they are, and that's not my subject today, but I wanted to highlight there is such a thing as equality that's separate and justice that's separate. Sometimes they come together, other times they don't. Now, we're supposed to have justice in all aspects of our life as Muslims, but especially when it comes to work of deen. Because one of the calls of our deen, one of the purposes of our deen, the otherworldly purpose is akhirah, Jannah. Saving ourselves and trying to help others save themselves from fire. One of the worldly purposes, one of the fundamental dunya purposes of our deen is justice. This deen came to give people justice. Inna Allaha ya'murukum an tu'addu al-amanat ila ahliha. It's one of the summaries of the deen. Allah has no doubt, it is Allah that has commanded you that you give the rights to those who deserve them. وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ. And whenever you make judgments between people, you do so with justice, with fairness. This is one of the fundamental summaries of Islam, that Islam essentially calls for justice. It's impossible for a Muslim to say, I'm an advocate for Islam, I stand for Islam, I'm serious about my religion, and not take justice seriously. It becomes impossible. One of the credentials of the Prophet ﷺ, which gives him the right to stand up and call to Islam and even claim to be a messenger, is that it was already established among the Quraysh that he was a symbol of justice. He was a pillar of justice among them. When they would have a dispute among themselves, they would go to the one who they know will not be unfair, and that would be Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So justice is at the very heart of what Allah Azza wa Jal calls towards. Shahid Allahu annahu la ilaha illa huwa وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ وَأُولُو الْعِلْمِ قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ. قَائِمًا بِالْقِسْطِ. Allah puts Himself, the angels and the people truly that have knowledge together on one platform and says He's standing on justice. He is establishing justice. Now, let's talk about within our focus, Islamic organizations, Muslims working together. Look, there are a few realities. In any organization, Islamic or non, you have to work with different kinds of people. People have different kinds of backgrounds. They come from different ethnicities. They come from different educational backgrounds at your company, at your school, at your job. It may be that you have to deal with very different kinds of people. Not only are people's backgrounds and their educational levels and their knowledge levels and their maturity levels, they're all different. Sometimes people's temperaments are also very different. Some people are very, frank all the time. They're not very serious. They're always joking around. Some people are very serious all the time. They get upset very easily. Some people are one way in front of you, some other way behind you. People are of different temperaments. And in an organization, by definition, you have to learn to work with others. You have to learn to work with everyone around you. And it's very difficult for everybody to mold themselves into your expectations. In other words, we just naturally, we like things the way we like them. And when we see a person, a group of people, others in an organization that don't behave the way we do, they don't talk the way we do, they don't think the way we do, they don't act the way we do, it's naturally agitating. It's just agitating. And it's not very far-fetched that you might want to distance yourself from people that are very different from yourself. You kind of hang out, in Arabic there's a saying, إِنَّ الطُّيُورَ عَلَى أَشْكَالِهَا تَقَعَ. Right, birds of a feather, we say in English, right? Birds of a feather flock together. So you find something in common with another person, like maybe you're a physician, you work at a hospital, you find a Muslim doctor, you hang out with him all the time. Right? Because you're kind of similar and you have some similar habits. Or you find in an organization there are a lot of older folks and there are a couple of younger guys. This actually happens in the class that I teach. Some of our students are much older and some of them are significantly younger. I'll notice that, and even on the sister side, the married sisters, the older sisters, they're all by themselves, and the younger sisters are by themselves. The older brothers are by themselves, the younger ones are by themselves. You know, it's naturally be inclined towards people that are closer to us. And this is natural. Actually, my adult life was spent in a city that is the thesis of that subject, where people flock to people that are closer to themselves, at least ethnically. I lived most of my adult life in New York City. And you have Bangladeshi neighborhoods, you have Indonesian neighborhoods, you have Turkish neighborhoods, you have Chinese neighborhoods, you have Korean neighborhoods. And when you go into one of those neighborhoods, you better know the language. Because even the store signs and everything is going to be in that language. You know, with some parts of Astoria, there used to be Greek neighborhoods, all the signs were in Greek, nothing was in English. Other parts now are like Arab neighborhood. All the signs are in Arabi, and you can't even, and you better know Ammiya too. You can't get by in Fusha, right? They'll double the price on the rest, on the shawarma on you. But they are, you know, people flock in one neighborhood, and they move to, you know, Jackson Heights is practically Punjab. You know, that's what they turned it into. And this happens very naturally. But now we're talking about an organization. And it's on top of that, an organization of Muslims. And let's be even more specific. An organization of Muslims working in the West. Which means some of you have come from Morocco, some from Algeria, some from Lebanon, some from Pakistan, some from India, some from Bangladesh, some from Turkey. Oh my God. More from Somalia and all over the place. Ghana. And we're working in one masjid. And we're working in one organization, one relief organization. We have very different backgrounds culturally. We have very different norms. We have very different senses of humor. We have very different personalities. Because we're very, very different people. And now we're all in this organization together. You know what ends up happening very naturally? All the Pakistanis on the border are hanging out together. All the Egyptians are hanging out together. All the Syrians are by themselves. All the Bangladeshis are by themselves. We just naturally flock to what we find something in common with. And then of course the real orphans of our community, the youth just hang out by themselves, who are not even sure of their ethnicity at this point, because you know, they weren't raised on baklawa and biryani, they were raised on pizza and burger. So they don't care, they're just hanging out by themselves, but they're kind of to themselves. So we've segmented our organizations. Not officially. Officially we have kind of sometimes politically correct representation from different ethnicities, like token representatives from each side. Right? But تَعْرِفُهُمْ تَحْسَبُهُمْ جَمِيعًا وَقُلُوبُهُمْ شَتَّى. Even though that's a depiction of the munafiqun, I'm just saying. You might see that they're one board, one lajna. But man, they're just all over the place. I can't tell you how many masjids I've went to, and there's a conflict going on between community A and community B. I'm not going to tell you the ethnicities, you can very well guess what they are. Brother, we need an Urdu speaking imam. We need an imam qualified from Darul Uloom, Deoband or Nadwa or somewhere else. And then I'll go to the other side and they'll say, brother, we need an imam from Azhar, or we need an imam from Qura, or we need from Madinah, because you know, يجب أن يتحدث العربية, all of that. And it's not about the importance of speaking Arabic or right qualifications, it's just the Desis want a Desi guy and the Arabs want an Arab guy. And they're fighting with each other about it. And they're fighting about 8 Taraweeh or 20 Taraweeh, and the fact of the matter is most of them don't even pray the Taraweeh. They're just fighting about it because the Arabs are on one side and this is on the other side. Most of them are like that. That's just what it's become. Now in the midst of all of this, we have to talk about justice within Islamic organizations. And in my view, Allahu A'lam, but in my view, one of the first obstacles of justice is that you don't see another person as equally important and equally valuable as yourself. And one of the things that's done that, one of the diseases that has been injected into this ummah, and we're still struggling to get it out of our system, and we haven't even gotten close, is nationalism and tribalism. Nationalism was introduced into our ummah by colonizing forces. It was introduced. I'm not saying, you know, that some sort of asabiyya wasn't always there. It was. But not like this. The Europeans literally drew lines for us in the map of the Muslim world, and I identify myself as Pakistani. And so 50 miles south of me, or north of me, across the other side, there's somebody praying salat in a masjid also, but he's first what? He's Indian first. Then he might be Muslim too. But he's Indian first. Across the water a little bit over there, they're Bangla first, then they're Muslim. I'm Algerian, that guy's Moroccan. That guy's Egyptian, that guy's Syrian. I'm Somali, that one's Sudani. Nobody on the outside even knows the difference. And actually, originally, our actual nationality is La ilaha illallah. That's our nationality. When I look at you, of course, there is a sense of, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. We made you into nations and tribes so you can get to know yourselves and each other. You might familiarize yourselves with one another. But our original affiliation is to Islam. And we, wallahi, have an opportunity in the United States. Because we're so diverse ethnically, we have an opportunity to regain that sense of definition. To rebuild that definition. That we don't look at the imam or the speaker or the brother or the person you're praying next to as someone from a different country. You look at them as from the land of Islam. And the bond between us, I say it over and over again, to me it's not cliche. The bond between us is thicker than blood. It's thicker than color of skin. It's La ilaha illallah. It's Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What stronger family tie are we going to have than this ummah? Inna hadhihi ummatukum ummatan wahida wa ana rabbukum fa'budun. I argue that the lack of appreciating ourselves as an ummah first, the lack of thinking ourselves as one people first, is at the heart of many of our problems. Especially when it comes to injustice among ourselves. It's at the heart. There are other problems too, but this is one of those big ones. It's one of those big ones. We're not able to get it out of our system. We're not able to gravitate towards another. And we still look at people from a different country with kind of, what's his agenda? What does he really want? He's probably with those guys, with the rest of those guys. And we have to kill this mentality. We really do. And I tell you, when we are able to destroy it here, it's going to permeate to all over the world. That when we create this kind of, this kind of sentiment towards other fellow Muslims. Now, this is one obstacle. The second obstacle, and this obstacle, by the way, broods two things. I told you about nationalism being a serious problem, right? When a nation is very patriotic, very nationalistic, what do you see on the streets? What do you see on the streets when a nation is very patriotic? Flags. You see the flags. But you know what? You don't normally see flags in any streets, in any country. You don't. You only start seeing the flags during the World Cup Championships. Or during war. When there's a war happening, when there's a conflict happening, you'll start seeing the flags. When there's a conflict in sports or in the military, you'll start seeing flags. In other words, love of country is less about loving your country, it's more about hating the other country. You have to understand this mentality. Fir'aun never tried to instill in his people a pride of Egypt. Except when the conflict came between him and Musa alayhi salam. وَيَذْهَبَا بِطَرِيقَتِكُمُ الْمُثْلَى. He will remove from you your exemplary lifestyle. Before this, he would talk about himself owning everything. But now he wants to instill in people, this is for love of nation. You have to love yourselves. In other words, nationalism and especially patriotism is highlighted when it's against somebody else. It's excited against somebody else. It's less love of yourself, it's more, I don't want those guys to be on top. I don't want them to win. It's us versus them. Injustice happens in two ways. One, you side with your own at the expense of others. That's one kind of injustice. That your love of your own people, your love of your own clique, it keeps you from being fair. This can happen at the level of family. Your family says, we're going to do this, and you know it's wrong what they're doing. And you don't speak out against it, because we got to stick with the family. How can I speak out against the family? That's on the one side. And on the other side, what is it? You can be unfair, not out of love, but out of hate. You hate the others so much, you're not even willing to listen to them. You can't even hear a word from their mouth. Even their name is said and you get angry. Two forms of injustice I'm talking about. I'll repeat them again. On the one hand, you can be unfair out of love. So you don't pass fair judgment because you're siding with, you're biased towards somebody. Or you could be unfair out of hate. You're biased against somebody. With that in mind, let's read these ayat. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina lillahi. Those of you who claim to have iman, be those who are qawwam. Now Allah didn't say qa'im, He said qawwam. Qa'im is ism fa'il, it means those who do something. Qama bi, to do something, to stand by something. Qawwamun bi, who really does their best, and over again. In fa'al in the Arabic language there's repetition. You do it over and over and over again. So every opportunity that comes up, you rise again for justice. You rise again and you rise again. Qawwamina lillahi. Lam here you would call it, it attributes the maf'ul lahu. For what purpose will you stand up? Over and over again, for the sake of Allah. Shuhada. Lillahi shuhada. Some tie those two phrases together. Only for the sake of Allah will you be witness. That's one grammatical explanation. Stand up, being witnesses only for the sake of Allah. Now stand up for what? Bil qist. Stand up for justice. Stand up for justice. Only for the sake of Allah being witness. In other words, when you stand up for justice, you're not standing up for justice for your rights, for somebody else's rights. Your first obligation is to Allah alone. It's for the sake of Allah. And Allah made the word shuhada here. You could say it's zaida. Kunu qawwamina lillahi bil qist. فَأَضَافَ شُهَدَاء. Why? Because when we think of shahada, what do we think of? When we think of Muslim stands by his shahada, what's the shahada? La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah Azza wa Jal is basically equating two things. Our standing up for justice is actually a proof that we are shuhada to Allah, that we are people of La ilaha illallah. When somebody truly believes in La ilaha illallah, they don't just say it, they stand by justice. At this point, also because the word will come up, there are two words in Arabic for justice that are used in these ayat. There's qist and there's adl. There's qist and there's adl. And there are many differences between them, but there's one difference I really want to make sure I highlight in this conversation. Qist is the more comprehensive word than adl. Adl also means justice. Qist in English translation at least also means justice. But the more comprehensive word in Arabic is qist. I can argue that it's made up of three parts. Qist is made up of three parts. Part one of qist is that you make sure before the trial, imagine there's a disagreement and you have to make a verdict. Before the trial you make sure that the process itself will be fair. Of course in a court you bring witnesses, don't you? But can you bring corrupt witnesses? Can you make up witnesses? You can present evidence. Can you make up evidence? Sure. You can have fake evidence. You can have a sham trial. You could. Qist ensures that the process itself is clean. Before you even begin the court hearing, the process itself is clean. Then qist also implies that the judgment itself that is made is also fair. So there's two things now. The process is clean and the judgment is fair. Now if any one of these things is missing, will justice be done? If for example the evidence is fake, even though the judge is fair, will the trial come out bad? The judgment will be bad. So you have to, the process has to be clean pre-trial and the judgment has to be fair. But there's a third part, and that's the really important part. Now that the verdict has been passed, this one is guilty, this one is not guilty. The trial, the money goes to him, it doesn't go to him. This percent goes to this percent goes to that one. Whatever the disagreement may be, now the trial has been passed, and the verdict has been passed. Now to implement that verdict, to implement it, to execute it. Because passing a verdict itself is not enough. To say this one should get this and this one should get that, that's okay, now the judgment is made, but now let's execute the justice. Execute it. This is qist, all three things. Basically from the beginning of justice to the end of justice, to see it get done. Does it happen a lot of times in Muslim society that a judgment is made but still the compensation and the punishment is not delivered? Does it happen? That wouldn't be qist. Even if the judgment was fair, there would be adl. There would be adl, but there wouldn't be qist. Adl is to pass the fair verdict. So it's a third of what qist is. Adl is to, when a trial is brought before you, and tahkumu bil adl, when you make a judgment, then you do it with fairness. You look at the evidences carefully and you pass a fair judgment. That's adl. But qist goes, no, don't just pass the judgment, establish it too. Make sure it's executed also. You understand this difference? Allah says to the believers, make sure that you stand by the implementation and execution of justice. كُونُوا قَوَّامِينَ لِلَّهِ شُهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ. For the sake of Allah, you better establish justice in this way. Make sure that it's done from beginning to end. In other words, we are really cautious about this process. Within Islamic organizations, are there going to be conflicts? Yes. Personalities are not going to match. It's not because you're a munafiq. Just because you're Pakistani. That guy's Bangladeshi. Didn't work out that well. There's going to be some conflict. Sometimes the conflict is innocent. Sometimes you misunderstand what somebody else said and a fight broke out. How many masjids I've been to where lawsuits are happening? Lawsuits between masjids. It's amazing. I mean, I'm baffled. I'm just baffled. I mean, I'm at a loss. I've been to masjids where a line has been drawn and they say, well, they built that masjid, we built this masjid, we're going to pray Jum'ah over here, they're going to pray over there, your cars better park in that parking lot, our cars will park in this parking lot. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And it is happening in, the educated community of America. Subhanallah. And this is our state of affairs. And you have to stand by justice not for yourselves, but for the sake of Allah. The first fear we have is of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, what does Allah add to this conversation? وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Don't allow your shana'an. Shana'an is one of the most hyperbolized, empowered words in Arabic for hatred. Al-bughd, al-shadid. When you have really intense hatred for somebody, you even hear their name, it upsets you. That kind of guy. Now imagine he's on the one end of the trial and you've been made the judge. And you don't like that guy. He insulted you last week. He said something to you the other time. He keeps making fun of you. Everything you say, he says the opposite. إِذَا قُلْتُ تَمْرَى لَقَالَ جَمْرَى. Right? Whatever I say, he says the opposite. He's always opposing me. And now I'm the judge and he's on trial. Should we expel him from this organization? Should we do any proceedings against him? Whatever. Don't allow your animosity against a nation, against any group of people. Shana'anu qawmin. Any group of people. Ala alla ta'dilu, to keep you from not doing justice. In other words, one side of the coin. Don't be unfair out of hatred. And this shana'anu qawmin is incredible because it could be stereotypes you have against an entire group of people. It could be personally you got a problem with him. You don't like these 2-3 bunch of people and you want to make sure that they are put down, that something is started against them, You make sure that that hatred does not overweigh the fear you have of Allah. Because when you're passing judgment, first and foremost, you are doing justice for Allah's sake. كُنُوا قَوَامِينَ لِلَّهِ شُهَدَاءَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Actually, grammatically, قَوَامِينَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Shuhada'a lillah. That's the normal sequencing here. The maf'ul li ajlihi comes towards the end. But the maf'ul bihi is put later, maf'ul li ajlihi is brought first. In non-technical language, what that means is, especially for the sake of Allah, you better watch out. Especially because of Allah, you better watch out. It's beautiful also because this is in Surah Al-Ma'idah. Surah Al-Ma'idah from the beginning talks about the rights of Allah. What Allah deserves. Allah's expectations of the Muslims. And so Allah is highlighted even here when it comes to standing up for justice. Now Allah says your hatred of a people should not keep you from doing injustice against them. Look at any nation. Any nation. When you talk about unfair trials, this is one of the root causes. One of the root causes for injustice in the world. The United States is no exception. I'm talking about court hearings, political aspirations, and even we're talking micro inside Islamic organizations and Islamic work. When unfair things happen, most of the time they happen because somebody has some hatred, some bias, some anger towards somebody else. Allah says don't allow that anger to overpower you, to not do justice, to not pass the verdict fairly. اِعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. You had better do justice. It is closer to taqwa. In other words, now Allah makes justice a matter of taqwa. You see Allah mentioned Allah first in the beginning too. And now taqwa. Taqwa is obviously taqwa of who? Of Allah Azza wa Jal. Of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ خَبِيرٌ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ. And you better watch out for Allah. First of all, do justice because it's an act of taqwa. It brings you closer and closer to taqwa. And it's closer to the proof that you have taqwa. How many of us know if we have taqwa or not? We don't. We don't. That's something only Allah knows. Allah knows how much taqwa someone has or not. Allah says when you do justice, you are closer to taqwa. You don't have it, you're closer to it. In other words, you wanna know if you have taqwa, you want to get closer to it, you better stand by justice. Now it's not a matter between you and me, it's a matter between me and Allah. Allah changed my perspective on dealings. And Allah is watching all the time what you're up to. Now look at the other ayah, subhanallah. Beautiful ayah, Surah An-Nisa. The other side of the picture. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qist shuhada'a lillah. Those of you who have iman, stand up for justice. Over and over again. Qawwamin. Stand up for justice. Do the right thing. Every time. Not just one time, every time. Do it over and over and over again. Being witnesses to Allah. Shuhada'a lillah. This time Shuhada'a lillah is pushed to the end. And Bil-Qist is mentioned. And this is the beauty of Surah An-Nisa. From the beginning to the end, it's talking about justice. Justice to the orphans, justice to the women, justice to the needy. The whole surah it's centered around the subject matter of justice. So when the ayah came, Al-Qist is highlighted first. So Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Kunu qawamina bil-qist, shuhada'a lillah. Now I told you in the beginning, right? On the one hand, there's justice, injustice out of hatred. And then there's unfairness out of what? Love. This ayah is about unfairness out of love. The previous ayah was, don't be unfair because you hate somebody. Now Allah says, وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ. Who are you going to love more than yourself? Allah says, stand and do the right thing, pass the right verdict, even if it goes against yourself. Before anything else, in order to be fair, you and I have to learn to crush our ego. We have to learn to crush our ego, because when you and I are wrong, it really hurts to admit it. I mean, it pinches. It's like surgery. When somebody comes and tells you what you did is wrong, your first reaction, second reaction, third reaction is, one, how dare you? Who do you think you are? No, it wasn't me, it was someone else. Your first reaction and my first reaction is not, you're right. Shouldn't have done that. My fault. And more so, in personal conversations, it might be easy for you and me to accept. I was wrong. You know when it gets really hard, the more higher up you get in an organization, the more public you become. It's embarrassing to publicly accept that I did something wrong. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said that. I regret saying it. I'm sorry. These are difficult things to say. Allah Azza wa Jal began by saying your first bias problem will be a bias in your own favor. Before you have bias for your children and your countrymen or whatever else, your tribe, your first bias problem is yourself. You're not fair to yourself. When it comes to the verdict being passed against you, we all get defensive. We all get defensive. It's very difficult for us not to be. Allah Azza wa Jal crushes that in us and says, if you really stand up for justice, time and time again, if you will make a mistake, you will own up to your mistake. You will say, yes, I was wrong. Even if the verdict goes against myself. وَلَوْ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَوِ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. Even if it goes against parents. Now imagine, Allah Azza wa Jalla has given parents such a high status in the Quran. In the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's such a high status parents enjoy. But Allah says justice enjoys even a higher status. When it comes to fairness, even if you have to stand against your parents, you must. If they're being unfair on something, with all due respect, and you will not raise your voice against them, and the ethics of dealing with them will stay intact. But what is fair is fair is fair, because you're not doing it for your parents, you're doing it for Allah. You even have to, not only do you stand against yourself, if your parents are wrong, you have to stand against your parents and say, no, this is wrong, you can't do this. This is not right what you're doing. You have to do this. How many of us are going to be put in that, and this is not a domestic conversation, but your mother is being unfair to your wife. And you know she's being unfair to your wife. You know she's, unnecessarily giving her a hard time. And you're not saying anything. You have to stand up for justice. You say, this is wrong. Your father's engaged in a haram business. Your father's doing all kinds of shady dealings. And and you're scared of dad, and then you say, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, you quote that ayah, but you forget about this ayah. If it means standing up for the right thing, with all due respect, without yelling and screaming, but you have to find a way of even standing up for justice to your parents, even to them. أَوِلْ وَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ. And the closest relatives, because it's hardest with the closest relatives. And especially when, the elders get dismissed, oh, uncle's always complaining. And the youth get dismissed, you're just a kid. What do you know? You're always going to get dismissed by your family, that's a formula. You will get dismissed by your family, but you still have to stand up for the right thing and not cave in. You cannot cave into your family. Sometimes it might happen, your father's in the Islamic organization and he's the one that's making all the trouble, and you have a bias towards him because he's your dad. But when you look at it fairly, you realize maybe dad does have a temper problem. Maybe he did deal an unfair hand. And then you're stuck in a jam. Do I stand up for justice or dad? You're going to be stuck in those situations sometimes. And Allah Azza wa Jalla is compelling us. Doesn't matter how close the relatives are. Doesn't matter who the parents are. Doesn't matter about yourself. Doing the right thing comes first. These are one set of biases. But then there's another set of biases. And it's so relevant to the Muslims, it's awesome. إِيَكُنْ غَنِيًّا أَوْ فَقِيرًا. You know, in the modern Western justice system, we see this a lot of times. We see that, you know, and in old systems, in kind of corrupt systems, we had the exact opposite. When a rich person in the corrupt society, when a rich person commits a crime, what happens? Do they get arrested or no? They get away with it. They just pay it off, or they're related to somebody up top, so they get away. And if the same crime is committed by a poor person, does he get it or no? He gets hammered for it, right? And then you have the opposite form of corruption. Some kid gets caught shoplifting from like a poor neighborhood, right? He gets caught shoplifting, and they say, you know, the lawyer comes and says, well, this kid, you know, he's raised in a tough neighborhood, and in difficult economic times, everybody around him is a gangster. That's why he committed this crime. You need to go easy on him because, you know, because of his background, because of his situation. So you should consider the fact that because he's from a poor background, you should go easier on him. Allah says no. Whether you're poor or young, the law applies before you equally. Justice applies before you equally. And if a rich guy did the same shoplifting, you'd say, you had no reason to shoplift. You were just doing that for the thrills. You should get punished more. Nope. Everybody's equal before the law. Now, wealth and poverty are specifically mentioned. Allah could have mentioned old age and young age, men and women. Allah could have mentioned any criteria. But the specific criteria He highlighted that gets in the way of bias, that creates a bias in the mind of the judge and in the minds of the people when they're dealing with each other. Allah mentioned money. Lots of money, lack of money. So let's talk about how that can get in the way, sometimes, of us doing justice. You have a person that donated a lot to the organization. They give a lot of money to every fundraiser, first guy to raise the hand. And he drops a huge check. You know the one that gets the big takbir? That guy. And then he is starting to make very unfair demands and impose his will onto a community, onto the organization. And he's starting to say things should be this way, not that way, not this way. The fact that he gave his charitable donation now automatically puts him in a position of authority in that organization. In other words, he gave it for the sake of Allah and a little bit of control too. Allah does not accept mixed intentions, does He? If you gave for Allah, you're done. You have no extra influence over the masjid than somebody who gave a penny. You don't, but you know what happens, you can't help yourself. I gave so much, I should have a say in where this money goes, so I think we should get a chandelier over here, and this over there, and that over there, and you know, this kind of, and the more he gives, the more she gives, the more they feel they have a right to give an opinion. They do. And now, because they're the big donor, nobody speaks up. Nobody says anything. Why? Because brother, don't make him angry. Don't make him, because you know, we need those. Inshallah, the fundraiser is coming, the construction project is starting in 3 weeks. Just take it easy, don't say anything to him. After the fundraiser, if whatever you want to say, you can say. After the check is cleared. Okay? Then you can say whatever you want. Right now you don't say anything. These ayat just come to life. They just come to life. And then somebody poor has an opinion. Somebody says, you know, we're not giving enough attention to women's education. We're not doing this, you know, we're not doing this right in our organization. The way we dealt with the finances for this fundraising, the way the money was dealt with, the way the transparency worked, it's not good enough. We didn't keep good enough records. Somebody raises their voice and, hey, get out of here. Who are you? Who are you? You didn't even come. You couldn't even buy a plate at the fundraising dinner. And you're going to give your opinions? Jazakallahu khairan, there's the donation, there's the suggestion box, which at the bottom of it has a shredder. Right? Go put your suggestion over there, and we will bring your suggestion up at the board meeting, and we'll say inshallah. Right? And that's the end of it. That's the إِن يَكُنْ غَنِيًّا أَوْ فَقِيرًا. Depending on what kind of monies are coming through, you say I should deal with them differently. They should have different weight in an organization. These are the ingredients of corruption, by the way. This is the same corruption that happens in governments. This is the same corruption that happens in churches and synagogues, by the way. We're no different. Same corruption. This is a form of corruption. This is absolutely a form of corruption. I went to a masjid one time in the US where nobody knew who the board is. So who's on the ledge? Who's on the board? Nobody knows. It's a secret board. So how do you get on it? Nobody knows. It's a secret. Who donates to the masjid? That's a secret too. We don't know. It's built and it's taken care of. And all kinds of weird programs happen at the masjid, but nobody can say anything because it's all closed book. It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. The mafia at the masjid, it's amazing. You know? So masjid is one prime example, right? Because that's the most prominent Muslim organization there is. Before there's any other organization in a community, there is the MashaAllah. But there's a school, there's a Sunday school. Sunday schools have dictatorships. I've seen them. I've seen Sunday school dictatorships, Islamic school dictatorships. I've seen gangs inside Islamic schools, of committees. I've seen them. This is the problem. Bias. One, money or no money. Ethnicity versus the other ethnicity. Allah says, now, فَاللَّهُ أَوْلَى بِهِمَا فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ أَن تَعْدِلُوا. Don't follow your empty desires that you should do justice. Don't give in to your whim. Don't assume, and by the way, when people have a lot of money, they assume they understand more than everybody else. Why don't people understand this is the right thing to do? See, people, if you ask their suggestion, they're stupid. That's what comes in their head. Because they're already more qualified in terms of wealth, that must mean they're more qualified intellectually too. Automatic. Nobody else understands. And their whims become the right thing to do. Don't let your whims come in the way of doing justice. Dealing fairly. In any matter of collective work. Now Allah adds the last part, the very powerful part. وَإِن تَلْوُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا. Lay in Arabic is to twist your tongue, to manipulate your tongue. أن يتلاعب مع الألفاظ بالألفاظ. To play around with words. You know who does that really well? Lawyers. Right? The lawyer says, hey, so what verdict do you want? Guilty or not? And then he will create an entire case to prove. Actually, when you go to law school and they have trial cases and debates and things like that, you get to pick a side, pro and con. I'm against the death penalty, I'm for the death penalty. And 20 minutes later they'll switch sides. And he'll make an equally good case against it that he just made for it. Why? Because they master the science, the art and the science of twisting your tongue to make a case. To be able to make a compelling case, however well. So if you're eloquent, if you're well spoken, you can basically make a case for anything. So one kind of power is wealth. Another kind of power is this guy over here. This is very powerful. This is very powerful, especially if you're compelling. You can move crowds this way or that way. If you have the mic, and you can twist information, you can present partial information, you can cry wolf. You can do all kinds of things. And people will be like, yeah, subhanAllah, he made the announcement, I was so upset. This happened and that happened. And if you twist your tongue, you manipulate evidence. That would be the modern way of saying it. You manipulate evidence. أو تعرض. And what's the other thing? Sometimes there's evidence that goes against your own case. You know it's there, and you know if you bring it up, you lose the case. So you just pretend it's not there. You conveniently don't even bring it up. أو تعرض. Or you ignore deliberately. These are all mechanisms by which justice is destroyed. To not even bring up what could have destroyed your case. You don't even bring it up. If you're fair, you're going to say, here's my position, but here's the evidence against it that I've come across. But no, you try to hide that evidence. You try to hide that testimony, or undermine that testimony, or pay off that testimony. وَإِن تَلْوُوا أَوْ تُعْرِضُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرًا. Then Allah has always known what you've been up to. Allah Azza wa Jalla has always known what you've been up to. This is the essence of what I wanted to highlight, the generalities of justice, before we go into specifics of how. Now in a group, there are followers and there are leaders, yes? There's the team, there's the team manager, there's the amir of the organization, there's the group, there's the committee, etc., etc. There are different components of an organization. The reason I brought this up first is every one of them should be thinking about justice. The leader and the follower, the volunteer and the donator, the accountant and the president. Everybody should be thinking about absolutely clear justice, not taking any sides, being a piece of a larger puzzle. If the purpose of Islam is to bring justice to society, we will absolutely fail in doing so if we cannot even bring justice to our own organizations. How are we going to do that? What are we talking about? If there's not even justice inside these four walls, then forget justice outside. How can we complain about the corruption of anybody else? We have no right. No, right? We're supposed to be the examples of it. So this is what I wanted to start with before we get into this subject. And inshallah ta'ala from the next installments, which are going to come a while from now, as was mentioned, I'll be out a couple of weeks. The next installments are going to be, what are the qualities of followers in an organization? When you're a follower, when you're not the leader, you're the follower. What are their qualities? And how can they avoid injustice? And what are their rights? What are their responsibilities? From the Qur'an's point of view. Then we'll look at what are the qualities of leaders. What are the qualities a leader is supposed to have? Then we'll look at discipline. Finally, the last thing we'll look at is the discipline of an organization. What is the importance of discipline? And not having it, what will it do to an organization? And having it, what are the challenges to discipline? What are the challenges that can destroy an organization? These are the few lessons that we have left ahead of us, inshallah ta'ala. And I pray that these reminders for myself and for all of you lead to us running better organizations, cleaner organizations, and that it helps us do the work of this deen in a way that pleases Allah Azza wa Jal. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ni wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.